everyone, Carl with Littleroot Lessons, bringing you a deep dive into the world of Pokemon, and today we're talking about Beat Up and Justified. This is a tried and true strategy, kind of dating back to the early series of Sword and Shield BGC. Specifically, Arcanine was a very popular Justified user back then. So we're going to just kind of cover over this because it was popular in Series 5 when Terrakion and Cobalion and Virizion became legal, and it kind of carried over into 7, but we're going to get into that in a little bit, but it kind of fell off the face of the planet in Series 8 just because there's stronger things to do, but it might make a comeback in Series 9 depending on if the conditions are met for it. So what is Beat Up trying to do? So Beat Up it's kind of like this hyper-offensive threat where you try to take over a game with a +4 attack Dynamax threat. Usually it's Terrakion, but there's a bunch of other Justified users and combinations with Beat Up, things like that. But the idea is just to kind of take over the game with a very powerful attacker. It's very hard to beat sometimes just because it's good at what it does, and it's usually harder to beat them without having to Dynamax in front of it yourself. And it's very flexible when it comes to if one wants to go off as well. You don't have to do this turn 1 a lot of times. You can fake out the lead and swap it out and play around with it, and then Dynamax and Beat Up on turn 5 or 6 and just take over the game at that point. So it's got a very high skill ceiling and a very low floor for just like overall play, so it's good for newer players and older players alike. And the history for this, like I said, dates back all the way to the very start. Was always present in the since the Series 1 meta, but Follow Me and Redirection took off about the same time and made it very hard to actually abuse a lot of the time. The main users back then were Lucario, which was a little bit more straightforward on its face. You saw it coming a lot of the times. And then Arcanine, which was a little bit sneakier because Arcanine could also run Intimidate. So Arcanine made the most use out of it, being able to kind of hide your hand, and if your opponent didn't lead the Redirection user, you got to just do the Beat Up thing. And then it garnered a bunch more of attention when Series 5 came around because we got the Justified trio. Virizion, Terrakion, and Cobalion were probably some of the better Justified users in that format, Cobalion and Terrakion being the more popular ones, since Virizion was 4 times weak to Max Airstream, which was also super popular at the time. Common partners for Beat Up here, it's kind of looking at it, it's kind of treated like a Gigas Weezing thing. You need a Justified user and you need a Beat Up user, and the thing about this one is it's very flexible. There's a bunch of Justified Pokemon and there's a bunch of Beat Up Pokemon, and you can kind of just mix and match to fit your playstyle and what you need. Dragapult and Whimsicott are some of the more popular ones for Beat Up users just because Whimsicott is very fast, it has access to Tailwind, so it has more utility, whereas Dragapult's immune to Fake Out, has Will-O-Wisp, can actually Dynamax on its own if it needs to and be a threat if it wants to be. So that's kind of a cool thing for both of them. Popular Justified users nowadays are mainly Terrakion and Cobalion. And like I mentioned earlier, Arcanine still sees a little bit of play every once in a while as a Justified user for probably more lower end teams, lower powered teams and things like that. Terrakion is probably the most popular one. It's where the term Terracot comes from. It's Terrakion Whimsicott. So when it comes to movesets, it just really depends on what you're using. If you're using Whimsicott's going to probably run Tailwind, probably run Beat Up, maybe run a Moonblast or some kind of damaging attack, and then maybe either Charm or some other kind of support move for you. And when it comes to the Justified users, usually it's just attack, and protect. A lot of the times you probably will run Fly Orb on it just to maximize your damage output and things like that. And there's just a lot more play when it comes to just the Beat Up side of the things. Like I mentioned earlier, Dragapult gives you access to certain support moves, can even Dynamax. Whimsicott does the same thing with Speed Control and Charm, and a lot of its support moves also have +1 priority thanks to its Prankster abilities. So it just depends on what you need and what your team wants to be doing. When you're building with Justified and Beat Up strategies, making sure you have a reliable team, just like with Regigigas, is important. you can do the thing, and if you do the thing really well, a lot of the times you win the game that way. But when you can't do the thing, you need to make sure you have a backup option. Make sure to not just Dynamax turn 1 all the time. That's not the best way. That's probably not the best way to be utilizing this team. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not correct. It's kind of like playing with Colossal or Regigigas. Sometimes it's good to just hang back, wait a couple turns, get set up, figure out what your opponent's doing, and then you can Dynamax and try to take over the game that way. And a lot of the times it's beat up pairs well with other combos like Regigigas, like Colossal, and things like that. Or you could find niche beat up users to kind of throw your opponent off a little bit. Pokemon like Sneasel, Weavile, Charizard's a beat up user, which most people don't know about that. Scrafty, Urshifu Dark also gets beat up. So just small things to think about. You can kind of trick your opponent into thinking, oh, they're going to do this, and then you just Dynamax, go big, and beat up with the other Pokemon. Beating beat up strategies is fairly straightforward, though. As long as you have redirection or fake out, a lot of the times that it's just your opponent's not going to be able to do anything with it. They'll have to find some other way or avenue to victory. The exceptions on fake out are Dragapult and Sneasel. Dragapult because it's a ghost type, Sneasel because it has the ability Inner Focus. Again, the only way you can fake out Dragapult is with a scrappy Kangaskhan. So if you use Kangaskhan, you're probably fine. You could also match Dynamaxes and try to OHKO the Justified user. Terrakion, as being the popular one, is not very specially bulky, so being able to hit it with a rain boosted Max Geyser and taking it out isn't a very tall ask. Things like Kingdra, Mantine, any water Pokemon that can just go big and blow it up will usually blow it up with a Max Geyser. So short TLDR here with Beat Up. Beat Up very powerful and new player friendly and old player friendly alike. There's a lot of give and take to this kind of strategy because it's very flexible with what you're playing with. If you like Cobalion, you can play with Cobalion. If you like Arcanine, you can play with Arcanine. There's a lot of just like give and take with this combo. Redirection is key to stopping the setup, and being able to OHKO the Justified target can also usually get the job done. You don't have to Dynamax and do it. I know Urshifu Dark does a lot of damage to Terrakion and Cobalion, but sometimes you don't have to do that. And even though your gut tells you to Dynamax turn 1, it may not be correct at the time, so timing your Dynamax is super important when you're trying to play with this strategy. And with that all being said, I want to thank you all for hanging out and listening to this today. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. Make sure to leave a comment down below who you want to see me cover next. I know we're setting up next Wednesday is going to be Colossal, so that's going to be a fun one, especially since it's on its track to win its 3rd Players Cup. Maybe this weekend with a couple. I think there's 3 teams playing Colossal, so gonna have to keep an eye out for that one, and we'll have to talk about that next week. But yeah, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever in the world, and we will see you all next week. Bye, guys.